then the need for inference means
Just
that
blew my mind.
I need to have a communication everywhere for this thing, and I need this not just as my the Tesla bot as my butler, as my translator, as my everything else. I need it to house my AI to run it bigger and better. Welcome everyone. Warren Redlick is here, longtime Tesla bull and Tesla analyst, and myself, of course, Brian Wong. And we're going to talk about all the news, Tesla FSD, Teslabot, as well as supercharging. All the Tesla news, and there's been a lot of it, as well as Chinese competitors. Welcome, Warren. Glad to have you
Hello,
here.
thank you for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation.
So I've done some research on for people who don't know, Tesla had a big surge on Monday, went up 15%, but then gave a lot of it back yesterday. They went up 15% because Elon Musk went to China and then met with the number two man in all of China, Premier Li, and got permission to start selling FSD in China, which had not been allowed before. They also had approvals on several aspects of their data handling. China had said, okay, you can't have your cameras on your cars looking at potentially sensitive sites, and so you have to have all the restrictions. And they have a complex set of restrictions of 4 things that Tesla, first foreign company to be approved of. Only a few other companies in China are approved that way, but they have got that. So that looks like FSD sales in China are open for Tesla to do, and they've even reports are already started testing FSD in China on roads. Quick reactions from yourself, Warren. What do you think?
Well, I think it's odd that the Wall Streeters would care about FSD going to China when they don't believe FSD matters, right? They don't value test FSD in America, so why would it matter in China? I think take rate's probably going to be lower in China. I personally do not get excited about like FSD take rates and people paying for subscriptions or people buying FSD. That's a short-term thing. The long-term future is the robotaxi future. And China is, although it's a big market, it's probably a less important country for Tesla in the medium term for robotaxi revenue, because my guess, and I don't know the answer, is that the price of a human-driven ride in China is lower than the price of a human-driven ride in the US. So if you're looking at it from a robotaxi perspective, the real revenue to be gained and profit to be gained is going to be in the United States and Western Europe, Canada, a couple other countries like Australia and Singapore's small, but Singapore, maybe Hong Kong. I don't know what ride prices are in all these places, but even like Japan, I think ride prices are half what they are in the US. So the real gain if you're looking long term, where's Tesla's value creation? It's actually going to be robo taxis in the US, Canada, Western Europe. And China will be important because it's such a big market, but that's a few years further down the road when you have enough robo taxis that I could dive. That's all a conversation. I don't know how much you want me to get into that idea.
I think we can debate that. So first, I'll share some information, and then I'll quickly share my point of view on what you just said there. Looked at all the competitors. So there are at least 10 Chinese companies that are doing some form of self-driving. Pretty much they're all doing LiDAR. There are a couple of startups that haven't fully investigated yet. XPeng has been considered the leader for a long time, although there've been a flurry of announcements from the different players. They all seem to be using LiDAR. Nvidia chips, the Orin chip, and then going to go up to the Thor chip. So they didn't make their own, which makes sense. It was a huge lift for Tesla to go to its hardware 3 and 4 systems where they made their own chip. So there's various partnerships all going on there. So XPeng is available in 243 cities. They're just short of 800 major cities in China. XPeng is saying they're going to go with a global version to be released in 2025. But so
before you go into that, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
How many cars? When 243 cities is great. Is it 1 car per city? Is it 1,000 cars? Is it 10,000 cars? Do we know how many cars they have doing this?
So they are broadly available cars. So in terms of how many cars, so in terms of the whole market, this was up to 21, 22. So the prices of the cars are on the left, and the number of cars in thousands are on the right. So when I look at this, say that mid-range 300,000, so that the 50,000 and $60,000 car, is in 2022, 340,000 selling with intelligent driving and control features. And then
Wait,
you
how
can
many of those
say
are Tesla?
this didn't have a breakdown of how many are Tesla, but I don't think Tesla was allowed to do self-driving at all. They were included in the components. So again, data incomplete on that. But what they've all been saying, and based in 2023, is that it's become a relatively standard feature to have some form of driver assist in your $30,000 and up car, and even pushing some down to 25,000, where you have some form of driver assist. But that is might even be one with LiDAR and maybe just adaptive cruise control and lane keeping, and then number of cars per thing. But in terms of so let me summarize. There's a lot of text in these things, so don't read it. So basically, the NIO CEO said that his goal was to get to 80% of driving situations being handled by their system, which has LiDAR. They all say don't go with bad weather, don't go with road construction, don't use it with unclear lane marking, blurred lanes. So all of the really tough edge cases that Tesla's starting to handle now with the version 12, they say just don't do it. But we can drive, we can do some overtaking on the highway, we can control your speeds. Although I've seen videos where they had trouble controlling the speed on the highway, where they had to, it started slowing down because the person who's doing it was saying, I look on the roads and the signs are confusing, same plane. So it was like the system got confused and thought it had to slow down when it didn't. So even lane keeping it can't handle, and then blind corners, the complex intersections, all the like Chuck Cook's left turn, those kind of things cannot be handled. So 80% of the time it can do some stuff. So it's easy, relatively clear driving, but it can handle that basics of keeping you in your lane. Even changing lanes can be done, and some intersections they can do. So it's not a inferior system, but they are doing it with a lot of Nvidia support, which I was told for Li Auto, which also was saying that they're trying to switch. Li Auto was the one that was trying to switch to Vision, where they were trying to do Vision, and then they had LiDAR at the backup to keep it safe. So they trying to demote LiDAR. $7,000 for the system. So they're paying like maybe $2,000 or more to Nvidia, and then all their sensors, 30 some sensors, cost that extra amount. You had some questions about that?
I just, what you're describing sounds to me like they're not really using AI. Like they may have some AI involved, and you can say Nvidia, right? You can say, oh, we've got Nvidia, right? But
Yeah.
how many, Tesla has 6 million cars on the road collecting data.
Yeah.
Which of these companies has more than a few 100,000 cars on the road collecting data? Are they collecting the right kind of data? Do they have the compute? China doesn't have the compute because they may have Nvidia in the cars, but I thought that they were restricted from getting A100s and H100s. So how are they training? I think there's so many hurdles
So
to Chinese manufacturers developing self-driving. I don't see how they get there.
So some other data that I found is there was a
Hmm.
Sense Time, I think was a Hong Kong listed company that a couple weeks ago announced that they had a GPT-4 class AI system created. And then Hong Kong and China, of
What does
course,
that even
connected.
mean?
That means the scores are like when you do those rating scores of MMLU, like college tests, all that kind of stuff, based on the metrics that all of them are using commonly, the scores are equal to or better than GPT-4, which is
Yeah, but
now a
that's
very
not driving. That's not real world AI. That's large language model AI.
right. There's large language model AI. I'm just saying that their AI is of class. And for BYD, they just had their BYD Dream Day, and so BYD isn't switching up. They were not considered a leader in it. And you ask how many your Neos, your Xpangs are in the 250,000 to 400,000 car range having these systems. So because they only have roughly that many vehicles out there sold, BYD, they claim 2.6 million cars with level 2 systems. So some kind of stuff they have in there, but they were always considered like not that good on electronics, not that in terms of like their software and car was considered not that good. But they've done like loads of deals partnering with everyone, Huawei, all startups, Nvidia, and they said they got a AI large language model system put into their car to do that stuff. So in terms of possible data, they say they have 3 million cars. And in terms of putting in a new language model system, they say they have it. They say they will spend $14 billion and they have 4,000 people on their team. So in terms of like actually committing to try to do something, instead of saying that they have some AI, they have it. But in terms of like any tests online with a new system, I've not seen it. And up until last year, they were considered not among the top 3 or 4 companies with it. But as we know, they have high volume, and they're willing to make deals right away. But I would say yes, based on our knowledge, it takes a long time to get the data. It takes a long time to train up AI on an approach. They are still LiDAR focused on that, which is a bit of a crutch, and you have to develop that thing. The difference between Robotaxi for Waymo, which are like 250 cars in one zone, or if there are other Chinese competitors in there, generally they need 8 LiDAR versus 1 or 2 for these driver assist systems. And they need tens of thousands of dollars versus 7,000 for what Li Auto is doing. So that, in response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very impressed with BYD as a company on the whole. I'm currently in Cambodia, but I've been spending a lot of time in Thailand. I see a lot of BYD cars on the road in Thailand, and they look good.
Mhm.
BYD Seal looks a lot like a Model 3, but it looks really good. The BYD Atto 3 is sort of the one they're pushing right now. Looks pretty good. I don't want to say it's fantastic looking, but it looks pretty good. The Seal looks
Mhm.
really good.
Mhm.
But I don't know their performance characteristics or anything. I've ridden in a Dolphin, BYD Dolphin, seemed fine. And I would rather ride in a BYD than ride in a gas car.
Mhm.
People think that, I'm a Tesla fan, therefore I hate Tesla's EV competitors. No, I prefer any EV to any gas car.
Mhm.
And I think that BYD is really pushing to sell cars. But
Mhm.
I think that there's a long-term strategic miss there
Mhm.
that we could talk about, that I think Tesla has decided not to push the sale of cars as much, because and within a few years, every vehicle they make is going to be a robotaxi that they're going to keep or sell to fleets.
Mhm.
So building up sales offices I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but building up sales offices, the capex of building up a sales office, the hiring that goes up with building a sales office, and then 3 years from now you stop selling cars because you wasted this capex on something that didn't pay it back, and you hired people and you got to let them go, and there may be government restrictions on letting employees off. So, BYD going gung-ho on selling cars is an indication they don't think they're going to have robo-taxis anytime soon. If you understand the
Mhm.
robo-taxi world, the value of a robo-taxi is like 5x, 10x the value of a regular car.
Mhm.
So you're not going to sell, once you have robo-taxis, you're not going to sell them to customers.
Mhm.
So any company that is pushing hard to sell their cars is diverting capex from where it should be. The capex should be going into AI, not into sales offices and not
Right.
into advertising.
Mhm.
That's a I don't that's kind of an odd way of taking it, but we have this other issue, which is, do you have the compute? Do you have the data? Okay, they've got 4,000 people on their AI team. How many of them know what they're doing?
Right.
Right?
So that was why I discussed that they are not behind in large language models, so that they have competent people there. Are they really a top elite team? I don't know. In terms of chips, so they are getting H100 still.
You
The
mean they're
back door
smuggling H100s in, or are they actually buying them straight up?
resellers are getting them. So someone buys H100s in, say, a Supermicro server, and then they can then resell that over into China. So
Which
that was
means
a
that
back
China's
door.
which means that the Chinese company's cost of acquiring H100s is probably 20 to 50% higher than an American company acquiring H100s. And Nvidia probably won't give them support.
Right. Nvidia's trying to close that door.
Well, I
The
mean, they're
U
just not going to give them support. I mean,
right.
you're going to need support for your H100 cluster, and Nvidia is going to be like, "Hey, we can't help you. We told
Right.
you we couldn't sell you that. You went around and bought it, but we can't help you."
Right. Right. So then it
And
goes
I
to
just want to be clear. I
Yeah.
don't agree with the restrictions. I don't think China should be restricted from accessing H100s and A100s.
Hmm.
I want a friendly foreign policy with China, not an antagonistic foreign policy with China.
Yeah.
I think
Hmm.
we should be working together to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy and working together to explore space. And I hate
Hmm.
this hostile
Yeah.
attitude. I'm just practical reality. I don't see them
Right.
getting there.
Right. So I think you're right that the restrictions mean that China has to spend 20, 50% more. They also have domestic chips, which didn't have the extreme ultraviolet lithography because they were restricted from buying the. It's only the ASML in the Netherlands that has those machines, and they were restricted from selling those. But they have everything up into extreme ultraviolet, which means that they could get up to 10 nanometer, 14 nanometer feature sizes on chips, which is pretty good relative to the leading edge of 2 to 3 nanometers. I think it's a huge gap. But then basically, once you get to there, it's energy efficiency and other things that to get to the lower level. But they have made 7 nanometer chips. It's basically like if we never got the breakthrough on extreme ultraviolet and then had to use all of our old methods, which we used before, which was immersion into liquids and getting the light angles and doing a bunch of heroic things there. China's people are competent and they were able to get it to work down to 7 nanometers. So they're not that far behind. Then it's again that 30, 50% gap in energy efficiency, other efficiencies between doing things the hard, creative way with less um, precise light than going to the 2 to 3 nanometers, which is the leading edge. So it's not a black and white world of, oh, I don't have the chips, I can't do anything. No, they're just 50% behind. The restrictions mean they're 50% behind, and they're now working with a lot of money, Chinese government money, to catch up on that technology.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think that the other hurdles I see for them are the inference hardware in the car. So for people who don't understand that, the A100s and H100s we were talking about are training hardware. That you get all this data in, you use the training hardware to reprogram the inference hardware in the cars.
mhm,
Tesla's inference hardware is very, very energy efficient.
mhm,
Most likely, the inference hardware that the Chinese companies are using is less efficient, which means you use more energy, and it probably costs them more than it costs Tesla to deploy their own inference hardware. So they get disadvantage there. Now, China's pretty good at making cars inexpensively, so that's an advantage for them. The question that I don't know the answer to is, we know that Tesla's aiming for million-mile cars. And if you amortize the cost of your vehicle over 1 million miles, then your cost per mile goes down a lot. My guess would be that the Chinese cars, although they're making a lot of progress, are not million-mile cars. They might have million-mile batteries because they're using a lot of lithium iron phosphate. But
mhm.
is their manufacturing quality to the point, and Elon might say it is their manufacturing quality to the point where they can expect the BYD Atto 3, which is probably going to be one of their big, robotaxi platform vehicles if they go that way. Will that vehicle hold up for as long as a Tesla? And I'm
Mhm.
not sure because China's pretty good at manufacturing.
Mhm. Right. So I would say I would expect their build quality to be fine. I think they're fully competitive on that point. Is everything that I've seen and read on that seems to be good. And they also are loaded with electronics in terms of like I see on the back seat a screen per individual person. The screen up front, they got like 4 or 5 screens. You just load up electronics. So in terms of their inexpensive quality electronics, that's where the world gets all their screens and electronics from.
Yeah.
So they can load that up with that thing. So in terms of the big picture, so we discussed the technology quite a bit. They're not that hampered on other stuff, but Tesla is clearly in the lead. All the reviews said Tesla FSD was best in class in China compared to all the other makers. The other makers are moving fast. They're still hypermap, LiDAR, less AI on their approach, which has limitations. Like the goal was 80% usage, and bad weather stuff they can't do it. And if they don't have the AI, closing that 20% gap, that was always the problem. But in terms of a pretty good autopilot, they're on highways, they're on city streets, and that's where they're at. So then maybe that's where the gap is. Then and Tesla's rapid progress on version 12, getting all the edge cases and supposedly 12.4, 12.5. That if that happens, then the Chinese makers are faced with a choice. They have been putting this hardware in, which is more expensive. They've been using Nvidia as their main technology supplier. Do several of them decide to switch over? Do all of them decide to switch over to Tesla if Tesla solves robotaxi? I think if Tesla fully solves robotaxi with camera, I think the vast majority of them go. But
Yeah,
if
and
only
don't
some,
forget,
yeah.
don't forget, BYD is already a Tesla partner.
Mhm.
BYD sells Tesla batteries. These are,
Right.
people have this image that, Tesla and these other car companies in China have these hostile relationships. And the reality is that, at least with BYD, Tesla has a very friendly relationship. And
Right.
I don't know about the other companies. Like, I don't think XPeng or NIO, I don't take seriously as a company. So that's a whole nother issue. XPeng, I think I take seriously. Xiaomi might be serious. We'll see.
Mhm.
Xiaomi, I don't know if you saw this. The Xiaomi co-founder wrote a post. Ray for Tesla posted
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
that he went to somewhere like maybe Las Vegas and he test drove FSD 12 and he was blown away.
Mhm.
So, if Xiaomi might be the one that says, hey, we're signing on with FSD. We're not going to waste our time trying to do something else.
Right.
If I was BYD, I would do that. Like, I
Mhm.
would, and my gut hunch is, if you're Tesla, who do you want to license FSD to? You want to license it to FSD makers. There's all these people talking about Ford. Like, well, Ford doesn't make very many EVs. You
Right.
know, Hyundai makes a fair volume of EVs. Volkswagen kind of sort of makes a fair volume of EVs, but a lot
Mhm.
of legacy autos going towards hybrid again. And I
Mhm.
don't think Tesla wants to license FSD to hybrids. I think they only want to license it to EVs.
Right. So the competitors below BYD, they're making 100,000 to 500,000 cars, EV cars each. So there's like a handful that are doing that. Zeekr actually makes pretty expensive cars. So, and Zeekr has a Volkswagen relationship because they put money into them. So they are making, yeah, way more cars. Like Ford making maybe 30,000 EVs. The top 20 Chinese makers all make more than that, and they're growing fast. They probably double, go from the half EVs um to full EVs for China. So that means like going from 10 million this year up to the full 25 million within like 2 years. So they have that extra growth in there. And yes, they are friendly. So I was at a panel where I met with a VC who invested in Xiaomi back when it was $20 million. So it's gone up like to 40 billion or a billion. So he made like
So he's
thousands X
happy.
money. He's happy. But he's personally met the Xiaomi CEO, right?
Yeah.
And the Xiaomi CEO and many of these other founders of these Chinese EV companies, they are sharp. They're not like a corporate thing. They came up from a startup culture. The Xiaomi guy, before he launched his car, he drove all the other like 60, 100 other cars in China, other places, drove them all before he came out with his vehicle. So they do the work. They're, you know, as hardworking, as focused as Elon on these things. And there
Yeah.
was a Weibo, which is the Chinese social media thing, where the Xpeng CEO said he welcomes Elon Musk in. So, if not all of them, definitely several would say, okay, yes, if you got it solved, I will use your system. And if it's better, then they could start pulling sales away from other people because everyone in China wants the driving assisted systems, right? It becomes like a relatively standard feature on 30,000 or more. So if you want 80% functionality or you want 100% functionality. So if they do, then they would shift over. And I think they treat Elon, much like Steve Jobs, when they came on the phones, that they want to follow him and they want to be the Android, the Xiaomi leader, where they adapt for Android with Google technology, and they adapted that. So they're willing to take that technology and then innovate around that other aspect, which I expect to be the situation that they're perfectly comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the funniest thing because it seems like the Chinese government and the Chinese auto industry is nicer to Elon than the Biden administration and the American auto. I mean, Farley and Ford has been a little bit friendly, but Mary Barra acts like Tesla doesn't exist. I don't even know who the Stellantis CEO is, but they
Right,
ignore Tesla, and Biden
right.
ignores, at best, Biden ignores Elon and Tesla. So, you know, it's so weird that the communist country is friendlier to the capitalist than the American capitalist country.
So in terms of China's motive for allowing Tesla in, and why are they doing this thing? They want Elon and Tesla to make their companies more competitive. They view that, okay, I'm dumping him into the water, and he's going to be winning and dominating, but it'll force all of our guys to get stronger. It's a
Mhm.
long-term game of like, I'm not going to protect you from, the number one guy. I want you to learn from him and and work harder because we want to go global anyway. So you have to compete. So that's how they view it is I don't want to protect you. I'm not going to coddle you. I want this guy in because he's the best. That's how they view it and how they want him in.
It was kind of funny because I've seen some people from India complaining that, oh, Elon canceled his trip to India and went to China. And I was like, well, look, I mean, number one, China's a better market than India. People in India, very few people in India can afford a $25,000 car, much less a $40,000 car. Number two, the Chinese government's like helpful and
Mhm.
encouraging, and oh, you want to own your own factory? Okay, make it happen. And with India, it's like they just keep throwing up roadblocks.
Right.
They do it to their own companies too. I'm not saying they're only doing it to Elon, but their government and their society, like they're going to fight against robotaxi. They have this whole thing called taxi mafias
Mhm.
in India. They they
Mhm.
they don't allow Uber.
Mhm.
I was in the state of Goa, and Uber is only allowed to drive you from the airport to somewhere, and I think that's only because the taxi mafia doesn't kill them. But
Right.
they're not allowed to pick up rides anywhere else other than the airport in the state of Goa, and that's because there's this, loose taxi mafia that's not governmental, but they just sort of control the taxis, and they're not going to let robo taxis go. So I don't understand why. If I'm Elon, I'm like, well, China's friendly to us, and China's letting us do what we want to do, and India keeps
Yeah.
throwing up roadblocks. Like, we really don't have that money to make in India anyway. Make that much money to make in India anyway.
Right.
So
India's
but
a future thing. They are. I think they became the number three market. Recently, so they are selling quite a few cars.
they're not
But they
really the
are
number three market. They're the number three in unit
unit
volume,
unit volume,
but the
cheap
price
cars.
per vehicle is much lower.
Right. Right.
And
So
as my friend Darren Jung, he's a Singapore YouTuber, said, the Southeast Asian market together, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, etc., is larger than the Indian market or the Japanese market.
right.
Oh, there's actually, I think the India market will be important in 10 or 20 years, but it's not important now. And
Right.
it may not be important in 10 or 20 years because that's a country where the government just really finds ways to shoot itself in the foot.
Right. So in terms of the overall EV market, just to your point, is that China has over half of the world's EVs.
Yeah.
Right. So they're at 50% of their 25, 30 million car market, which is double the United States. So the United States and Europe combined is still smaller than China in terms of overall vehicle sales. But half of Chinese cars are the super cheap cars,
Yeah, yeah.
15,000 or less, and then half are above. But even that
And just so
half,
people just so people know that
yeah,
China has some EVs that are like sub $10,000 and maybe even significantly less than $10,000, and none of us would get. No American would get into one of those things.
yeah, it's
They go like
basically
25
yeah,
mile an hour maximum speed, and if they got in a crash, you're dead.
right.
You're probably
They're,
safer
they're
on a
basically
motorcycle.
golf carts that have been slightly supercharged,
Yeah,
like very little. Yeah. So,
yeah.
so the China market, even just looking at the top half is say 4 or 5 million cars, EVs this year, 10 million cars next year versus 1 million in the United States or Europe or something like that. So it's actually Europe maybe 2 or 3 million. So it's way ahead in terms of all markets on EVs. The partners there would be the fastest moving to do stuff. The China government, if there was a chip problem, they will get you some level of chips to do the training inside the country. You could always deploy and then do. I'm thinking you do point releases if you kind of had some trouble with your compute. Obviously, better to get the data out. I think the Baidu relationship means Baidu or some other Chinese partner would be given the look over the shoulder to anonymize, do whatever they need to do to the data for China to say, okay, yeah, you can send that data out. It's still
Yeah.
useful for you to do training, but we have our third party make sure it's good, and then we can send the data out, and then you do full training, and then Tesla will be virtually unrestricted to do whatever they need to do. And based on the that China wants Tesla to succeed with FSD, they will find a solution because not like, oh no, we're reluctantly letting you do it. No, we want you to do it. We just have to figure out how. Is the
I honestly
position?
think I
Yeah.
honestly think if you're the Chinese government, there's two things that Elon is doing that you appreciate. Number one is he's cleaning your air,
Mhm.
right? Every Tesla cleans the air. And I mean, BYD is doing that too. They got a lot of their EV companies doing that, but that's a big thing that Tesla is doing is they're leading and they're helping drive this drive to clean the air. And if you're the most powerful bureaucrat or the wealthiest man in China, your grandchildren still have to breathe polluted air, and cleaning the air is a high priority. And then the other thing is I think China wants to be seen as a technology leader. And if
Yes.
China deploys autonomous vehicles in volume before the United States does, that's kind of like a see, we're number one,
Right.
you know.
Right.
That gives them a perception of a leg up in technology. And in reality, I think you know this better than I do, but I think in a lot of ways, Chinese technology, people think that China just copies America. Or like, I don't think people realize how very innovative the Chinese economy is. They're crushing it on batteries, and I think they're crushing it on solar. There's a massive innovation, huge volume of really smart, really hardworking people in China, and people massively underestimate the Chinese economy. And Elon even mentioned this that Chinese cities look modern and American cities look like crap.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I see
So to you,
that. I see, that's not just China. I mean, that's Bangkok.
yeah.
That's Phnom Penh. I'm in Phnom Penh, which is a relatively poor country. And Kuala Lumpur is a gorgeous city,
Yeah.
in Malaysia. And you're like walking around an American city, like, what the hell happened?
Mhm.
If you,
Right.
I, you know, I was in Brooklyn before I went to Japan, and I was like, Japan, of course, is really, really nice. And it was like, wow, Brooklyn, it's terrible.
On the point of China's government, four things or so that they would really want, and then for Tesla to succeed with. So if you go EV and go robotaxi, I you say to clean the air. In terms of numbers, roughly 7% of their GDP is lost to the pollution damage. And health damage, other things, 7% of their GDP is lost to that. On driving and road deaths. So, you have 35, 40,000 deaths in the United States, plus, 10 times more other injury accidents. China has 250 to 300,000 road deaths
Wow.
every year, and they have, millions of more accidents. It's why their spinal surgeons are so good, is because they see so many spinal accidents. Um, that's $700 billion a year, maybe more. That's from the damage for people getting hurt. A lot of pedestrians, a lot of other people getting hurt there. And then oil. So if they were to go electric and get rid of 30% of their oil things, they make 4 million, produce 4 million barrels, 3.5 million barrels of oil per day, but they import 10 million barrels per day, which is a huge geopolitical weakness. That basically you blockade the oil or just say Saudi, you can't give them oil. And then, in any kind of conflict, China's hosed on that. So reducing, if you to make go all electric, it'd be like you doubled China's oil production, right? Um, so in terms of like the overall big picture, I'm managing my country. I want to fix those things. I want to fix the air. I want to fix the health.
Yeah.
And that's why they could choose, and they're run by engineers, so not by lawyers. So they'll look at the numbers, the data, and they'll say, okay, it is 10 times safer. Now I want to save that $700 billion. All of you, all companies must now use Tesla FSD.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone put it in. They can mandate that like that. And also for robotaxi, they have a national robotaxi policy. Didi and the other guys, they're willing to go out to hundreds of these cities now. They have a plan to roll out to that. So their deployment at scale for robotaxi, they're ready to go. If you make it work, we will let you do it in 100 different
Yeah,
cities.
and we should add one more, which is Elon talked about this at Autonomy Day. If the cars drive themselves, then you've just basically 5x the efficiency of your transportation system, and that boosts your economy. And all of a
Right.
sudden, your economy becomes more efficient. And I would say another thing that I don't know how much of an issue this is for China, but I've heard that China is starting to experience labor shortages because of the declining population.
Yeah.
And if you free up all those drivers, you're able to move them into more productive work that has higher value added. Do they have the skill set where you can train them? But I think there has been some issues with labor shortages, and that frees up labor. Like people think, oh, you're destroying driver jobs. No, we're freeing up labor to do something more productive. As Karpathy put it, playing the line following game is something that humans are good at, but there's better things we can do with our time.
And China had these huge cities with a lot of traffic problems. So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
actually had, robotaxi, even supervised robotaxi, where the person's freed up, less stressed or something like that, you could shift over an hour of wasted time trying to struggle through traffic into something that's freed up where you can kind of do other work and something like that, especially go full robotaxi.
Oh, no, they're going to go there. You're going to see boring company tunnel systems all over China fast.
Mhm.
Elon's going to sell boring company tunnels to China, and in 20 years, China's economy is going to be like Elon has said. China's economy will 2 or 3 times the size of the U.S. economy. I think it's going to be 5 times the size of the U.S. economy because they're doing things to grow their economy, and we aren't.
Right. So to summarize on this
We're
and to
trying
go
to
to the other,
screw it up.
yeah. So let me summarize FSD. So basically, if Tesla solves their FSD stuff, they will be let fully into China. They'll get in there, and then if it works to robotaxi level, China will authorize it the quickest, and it is the biggest market.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we're agreeing on that. So then, okay, let's talk about the other points. So you had issues on supercharging. Yeah, there was some news where
So yeah,
Tesla,
there's
yeah,
big news. There's big news that Elon basically cut the. It's not technically the supercharger team. I believe it's the charging infrastructure team. Um, he let go Rebecca Tanucci, whose job title was not head of superchargers; it was head of the charging infrastructure team or senior vice president of charging infrastructure. So they have a lot to do with superchargers, but they also have to do with destination chargers and other charging. I believe there's a separate maintenance team for superchargers, so it's not like they're going to stop maintaining the superchargers. And Elon said in follow up, because there were some questions, he said, we'll continue to build out the ones that are already under construction, and we will continue to build, places where they're really needed. But I think the implication is they're going to be building less superchargers. And I want to give an example. So I lived in Florida for, more than 10 years. There's a spot where there was a proposed supercharger station that was going to have 200 connectors, 200 chargers in a place called Yeehaw Junction, which, if you're not familiar with Florida, I'll just explain. It's basically on the road, the Florida Turnpike that goes from South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Jupiter up towards Orlando. If you want to go to Disney World from South Florida, that's the road you generally take. And this particular supercharger was not on the turnpike, but it's like right near one of the turnpike exits. The problem is I've made that drive a whole bunch of times, and the supercharging that exists already is, I would say, at least adequate. Like it could be a little better. Like it would be nice if you added, and there's a supercharger on the Florida Turnpike right near that exit. I don't know if it's 8 or 16 units, right? So it wouldn't be that hard to add 8 there, and there's one called Canoe Creek that's north of that. You don't need 200. It was already basically adequate because I did the drive many times. It's already basically adequate at what they have now. So why are you adding 200? And I think there's something about this. There's a decision. There's a much broader decision that Tesla is making, that Elon has made with Tesla, about focusing capex. When you build out a 200 unit supercharger station, that's a lot of money, right? I think there was another one. My friend Scott Walters, Going Ballistic. I can't remember his last name right now. He's on YouTube a lot of
Scott Walker,
Scott
Dr. Scott
Walker.
Walker.
Is it Walker?
Walker, yeah, Scott Walker.
I thought it was
He's a
Walker.
Tesla guy, robotics
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I think he was saying there's another one that was proposed near Tampa, and it's like, there wasn't a shortage of superchargers in Florida. They're everywhere in Florida.
Mhm.
Um, and so, how much is the capex for building out these supercharger stations? And what if you took that capex and you put it into AI chips instead, AI hardware instead? And I think there's been some decisions made that certain places they were going to invest, like supercharger stations that aren't necessary. And what I'm saying is, like, this was like probably a misallocation of capital. This is
Hmm.
not where you would want to put your, even if you weren't doing this AI thing,
Hmm.
you wouldn't want to build a 200 unit supercharger in Yeehaw Junction. It's just not
Hmm.
necessary. There'd be a lot of idle superchargers. You'd probably never fill it.
Hmm.
I'm being direct based on my experience. Would you get, 40 of them used maybe in 2 or 3 years? But especially because it's not on the turnpike and it's on a road called Florida 60 that goes from Vero Beach across towards, I don't know if it's to Tampa or south of Tampa.
Hmm.
I never went that far on Route 60. Goes through
Hmm.
Lake Wales and whatever.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the volume of traffic on Route 60, Route 60 is one lane each way, 60 miles
Hmm.
an hour. It's not like
Right.
the Florida Turnpike where people are going 85 miles. I mean, the speed limit on the Florida Turnpike is probably 70 or 75, but the volume of traffic on the Florida Turnpike is much, much higher. So it was just an odd location. And I think that there may be, just on this point about Elon letting the team go, I think the team may have gotten bloated and may
Hmm.
have lost the sense of focus on, capital capex efficiency. So, but I wanted to turn that towards a robotaxi world. Let's go 5 years from now, right? And say, because you're making this capex investment in these superchargers. You're not just doing that for next year. You're doing that, when you make an investment like that, you're hoping it's going to pay off for 10, 20 years, right? Well, 5 years from now, we're going to a robotaxi world. And every new Tesla that's made is going into robotaxi use, and a lot of the existing Teslas are being used as robotaxis by the current owners who are, sure, I'll make $30,000 a year running my car as a robotaxi when I'm not using it. Why not? Um, in a robotaxi world, the existing supercharger network is really, really good
Hmm.
because they charge it. The robo taxis are going to charge at night, and they're dead at night. They're empty at night. I drove from Florida to California and back once. I drove from Florida to Texas and back twice. I drove from Florida. I went to Starbase I drove to Starbase from Florida to watch the second Starship launch. I mean, that's how crazy I am. But I drove to New York and New Hampshire and back. I've driven over a lot of the U.S. And when you're at a supercharger at night, there's nobody there, right? So
Hmm.
you can imagine you got a 24 stall supercharger and you got a whole bunch of robotaxis go in, and you figure each robotaxi takes a half hour to charge. Well, every stall is going to pump out 20 cars a night, right?
Hmm.
Well,
Right.
if you got 30,000 supercharger stalls in the US, that's 600,000 robotaxis that you can support. And presumably a lot of the robotaxis are going to be charging on level 2 chargers. We don't know what the plan is. I actually think there's a significant chance that Tesla is pivoting to wireless charging, inductive and
Hmm.
wireless charging. You think about it with a robotaxi, who's plugging it in? I don't think it's that big of a challenge to have some guy making 20 bucks an hour plugging in a bunch of robotaxis and unplugging a bunch of robotaxis. But if you had inductive charging, that just reduces that problem. And also, there's a maintenance issue with a couple issues with superchargers that I hadn't thought of until this came up. Number one, the cables are kind of bulky. And, I'm 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. I'm in reasonably good shape. Lifting a supercharger cable and putting it in my car is not a big deal. But imagine you're 80 years old and you're frail. I think that actually might be a bit of a challenge. Not to say it's impossible, it's just hard. It's just like, all of a sudden that's difficult, where pulling over an inductive charging pad is easy. And the cables are more vulnerable to having problems because they're moving parts, right?
Hmm.
The inductive charging removes the parts. So I think the efficiency is a little lower than a supercharger, I think. But the long-term reliability and maintenance issues are going to be less because there's less to break,
Hmm.
right? If there's no moving parts, then there's less to break. So it may have like a higher capex in installing an inductive charger. So I think there's a chance, because remember, they bought an inductive charging company, Hyperion or something like that, Hyperion from
Hmm.
Germany. They ended up selling the company, but they kept some of the engineers. Um, and they've talked about doing inductive charging. So if they go to inductive charging, it may be that they're able to deploy inductive charging in a way that superchargers become less relevant in a robotaxi world. And it's
Hmm.
just like, you think about it, like all the Tesla owners currently are like, well, I had to wait for a supercharger 5 minutes, 6 weeks ago. Like I literally had to wait in 60,000 miles of driving a Tesla, driving two different Teslas. I think one time I waited 5 minutes. And
Hmm.
then one time we were in Texas and there was a problem at a supercharger station and we waited like an hour, right? But that's
Hmm.
out of 60,000 miles and over 2 years of driving. I had like two problems. One that wasn't even really a problem. Like I waited longer for gas stations than
Hmm.
5 minutes, right?
Right.
I've had many experiences of waiting longer than 5 minutes for a gas pump. So
Hmm.
one wait for 5 minutes, and then okay, the superchargers, there was a problem with the superchargers. They had trouble getting a team there to fix it. Okay, that was an issue. Um, so I just think, the supercharger network is probably more than adequate right now. And I could see Tesla like saying, you know what, any place where we see like an issue, we're going to just discount charging at night.
Hmm.
Because they
Right.
did that in Florida. The
Hmm.
Delray Marketplace supercharger was like half price,
Right.
and like from 8 o'clock on. So
Hmm.
you'd go to the Delray supercharger, you'd plug in, and there's a grocery store. You go do your grocery shopping at 8:30
Hmm.
and charge your car at half. And basically, it was like slightly more than the cost of charging at home, right?
So just some news here from California is that up until recently, it was cheaper to charge your Tesla EV at a supercharging station than to charge it from home
Wow.
because the PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric utility company, prices are so horrible here that it was like 40 cents or more, and then you get usage penalties and other stuff like that.
You.
So that they were costing like someone had was renting a place and they had two Tesla EVs or two or three Tesla EVs, and they were paying like $1,000 a month. It was just like just like a massive, massive bill just because you're using too much energy, and so you get your prices are already high, and you get nailed even more. Then it was cheaper to go to a Tesla supercharger, but then Tesla just raised the prices on their supercharging thing to 58 cents or something like that. So but it's not a Tesla supercharger. I just pop in a station and make it fix. I have to fix more of the grid, which is a huger lift. I think Tesla will have to get to that point when they start going to lows and lows of semi trucks because if you go all electric, particularly you have a lot of electric semi trucks which are using 40 times electricity of a regular vehicle because they're driving all the time and then they're bigger. That's when we need to have 20% more electricity from the other thing. But you have a gap where I can add up to 10 million, 20 million vehicles. You're fine. You can put it find spots, you can get it in there. But then when you go really big, which is 10 million, 20 million cars per year, high usage, and then a million large semi trucks, then Tesla has to not just do and on the infrastructure side, the supercharging infrastructure side, they have to have a mega pack solution with solar in order to add in a lot more generation. Not just I'm sucking off the grid. I must make acres and acres of solar charging mega packs. Like basically the 108,000 square feet on the top of a Costco in the United States, a large warehouse store. To make that'd be about a megawatt of energy. But if I'm constantly drawing off that, I'll need to add like 10 of those, 20 of those per location just to have 10 trucks. So Tesla delayed the semi to later 2 years. I think because one, focusing on AI, everything is about AI right now. FSD, Teslabot, training, inference, Elon's redeploying to all that. So then they have to do a completely different solution for the large scale thing 2 or 3 years out, is in my thinking. So they're gonna
Yeah,
have
just
to like,
so people
yeah.
know, a semi is going to have a close to 1 megawatt hour battery pack. I think it's 800 kilowatt hours. So a 1 megawatt, no, I mean a 1 megawatt solar installation is going to generate probably, 8 megawatt hours. So that's enough for 8 trucks on the
Actually,
line.
only four. They
Is it
only
four?
4 megawatt hours per day because of
Well, that's 5 trucks.
sunlight. Yeah, so four trucks. Yes, I can charge four trucks with the output of an entire day. But if I'm drawing every day from that thing, if I have the US has 3 million semi trucks. So if I go to all those vehicles,
You need a lot of
then
solar.
a lot of solar. Right.
No, and Elon has talked about not only a shortage of, he's talked about first a shortage of voltage transformers and then a shortage of energy generation. My guess is that Tesla, like, this is something nobody talks about. My guess is that Tesla has either secured a supply of voltage transformers from somewhere, or they're already working on manufacturing their own voltage transformers. Because it's probably
Mm.
not that big of a deal for Tesla to make voltage transformers. They're pretty good at
Right.
electronics and electrical stuff.
Right.
And it's pretty closely related to what they do with Powerwall and Megapack anyway.
Mhm.
So I would guess that they're just manufacturing their voltage transformers. And yeah, I think you're right. I think they're going to need to supply a massive amount of solar to be able to power a lot of things. And not only is it going to they need to do it, but I think right now the capex is let's get real world AI solved.
Right.
So
Right.
once we
Because
get
if you
real
solve,
world AI solved, everything else gets easier.
right. And that goes to, yeah, so all the money's on that. It's sequence. I get this solved. And then also for my energy megapacks, I'm waiting for them to say, for my new AI data center, I'm gonna make, 10,000 megapacks, 5,000 megapacks. When they're using their own megapacks and their own solar at massive scale to power an AI data center, that I expect that to happen in the next year or two, probably just maybe three, because Altimeter Capital, which had $10 billion, Brad Gerstner, who's sometimes on All In podcast,
Yeah, yeah.
Bill Gurley talked about that. They made a forecast that the US will go from 5% energy for data centers to 20% in 2030. So 4x increase, which may
I,
be
wait,
low.
I think the number's already higher. I think there's a podcast that Gerstner and Gurley have together called
Yeah,
BG2.
BG2,
I
yeah.
don't remember whether it was their podcast or if it was the All In podcast that I saw this, that currently data centers, not AI data centers, but data centers are consuming like 16% of US electricity,
Hmm.
right? And it's probably going to be 50% data centers are going to be consuming 50. So, and that doesn't mean that other energy consumption is going to go down. It means total demand for electricity is going to radically jack up.
Right,
So there is a massive need for electricity generation. So, and I don't really see like, I almost wonder like why isn't Tesla using it? It's like they're saying they can't sell solar because interest rates are high. Why isn't Tesla just deploying solar on a mass scale for itself? And they have to
right.
some extent, right? Giga Texas has something like 70 megawatts of solar on the roof. Was it 70
Hmm.
megawatts? I think it was 70 megawatts.
Hmm.
Um, so I do think that Tesla will deploy solar at larger scale at some point. But again, it may be a CapEx thing, like, well, we can do that later. Right now, we need to get our AI solved. And they're so close to solving real world AI. And once you solve real world AI and you get robotaxis running, then you're just generating cash like crazy. And now you can start, you have the cash available to deploy that new CapEx to build out your solar.
So I have a little analysis here. Let me just bring that up. These data centers now, if you have 100,000 H100s, which is what the largest systems have now before you break the grid. So the GPT-5, 100,000, you use 100 megawatts. So in terms of like, if you have a problem on the grid sucking more than 100 megawatts, because there was a post that Microsoft was trying to make the infrastructure for GPT-6, and they basically were having to make it in multiple locations because they couldn't draw more than 100 megawatts from the grid before the grid crashed.
Yeah, Zuckerberg
So
talked about this too. Zuckerberg
yeah,
was on an interview and he talked about how you can only go so big with your data center because there just isn't enough power.
right. So that's a problem starting this year. You can hunt down some locations. They're saying maybe you can get to 150 megawatt hours, but then you have to do something in order to route in the power to one location. Like a nuclear power plant is generating a gigawatt or even 1.4, but then that power is going to power factories and other things. It's not all going to one location. I'm splitting it out to 10 different things in order to pull it off. So I can take everything from one, but then I have to make a new reactor, an entirely new thing, and say this is only for AI. This is for this one thing, which China could do, but other places have not yet. And it would take China even a few years to do, but they're building new reactors all the time over there. So this going to 200 megawatt hours for a GPT-6, which is next year, that needs 200 megawatts. That's where I see the need for a megapack solar solution to say, okay, I can't get the power elsewhere. I need to solve that thing. And XAI and Tesla are all at scale on this, where they are not constrained on chips. And Elon talked about spending $10 billion per year for that. So their AI spend, in order to keep pace with this development, real world AI, as well as GPT-6, GPT-7, is something where, and I have it for Grok as well, which is the Tesla model, is
Wow.
that you're going to need not just the energy growth, but also the data thing. Because um, Elon said that you run out of regular data pretty much this year. your Grok 3, your GPT-5 models, they're using 40 trillion tokens, and that's basically the level where you need to get real world video or synthetic data. Which synthetic data is statistically you're taking data and then you're statistically extending it. You're saying, okay, I make it more data that looks kind of like this, which is clearly inferior data, in my opinion. That it's, you're just making more kind of cases, but you're not able to properly generate, real cases on that. So that's where this starts wagging the tail wagging the dog, that in order to make this bigger data center, even if
Well, let me just pause you on this.
yeah,
My gut hunch is that by the time you get to Grok 3,
yeah,
that's going to be Dojo version 2. And
mhm,
Elon's target for Dojo has been energy efficiency. I think he's seen this problem for a long time,
yeah,
that they are trying to make Dojo energy efficient and, compute per watt,
yeah,
right? And I don't know this, but my sense is that they are significantly better in compute per watt, which means you get more compute on less electricity.
mhm,
Um, and then, Grok 1.0, Grok version 1 is targeted to video data for self-driving, but I think, sorry, Dojo version 1
mhm,
is focused on video for driving and
mhm,
probably for Optimus, but Dojo 2 chip, and I think there's a Dojo 3 chip coming, they are going to be more general.
mhm.
And I think that they may not be, I don't know if has Elon talked about using synthetic data. I think their focus is real world data,
Right,
not
for
just
forced
real world
driving,
data.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, there's real world data for video, there's real world data for audio. Some of Grok's intent is solving science problems, so they could be looking for like astronomical data, tapping into data from, radio telescopes or something like that to solve physics issues that
right.
aren't directly related to immediate, problems that we're facing, but helps us understand the universe. So I think there's a lot of different things going on. I have
Mhm.
not heard of any intention for Grok to use synthetic data. Have you?
I would say that it's based upon your problem. What are you trying to solve? If you can use real world data, then I would say you would choose that instead. That's what they are doing for, but they're doing simulations. So they are generating
Okay,
other
so
data.
let me address another point because we were going to talk about Optimus some point in this conversation.
Yeah.
Optimus generates a whole new level of real world data, including human conversation,
Hmm.
which is not synthetic data. So I've got the theory. I don't know if you want to take this off the screen.
Yeah.
Um, I've got this theory that, and I'm kind of alone on this, right? There's a group of people, Scott, we talked about, and others who think that Optimus is going to be a factory robot,
Hmm.
right? That the short-term future for Optimus is let's deploy it in factories. And my gut hunch is that's not the plan. The
Hmm.
plan is probably not this generation of Optimus, maybe the next 1 or 2 generations of Optimus. They get to the point where they're confident they can manufacture at scale at a reasonable cost, and they start making a lot of them. And this
Hmm.
is a little bit of Warren's wish list, my
Hmm.
hope rather than, but I think it's rational that if you made 100,000 Optimus bots, right, and you did a bot beta program where Brian and Warren and Scott paid $25,000 for an Optimus bot, and I would drop that money in a heartbeat,
Hmm.
right? And like their cost of manufacture at that stage is probably like $20,000 or less,
Hmm.
right? As they scale, their cost is going to go down, but they're probably so they actually make a small profit selling us a bot for $25,000. And then we just take it with us, and then they could give us some instruction. Please have your bot do this, and we'll do that. And we have our bot do something else. But we just basically take our bot for walks in different circumstances, right?
Hmm.
And expose it to a lot of real world data. And by that point, Optimus is probably going to have the ability to have conversations with Grok
Hmm.
built into Optimus.
Yeah.
So Optimus will be walking down the street, and somebody says something to it, and I don't speak Thai, but Optimus is going to speak Thai,
Hmm.
right? And the amount of data that Optimus can generate by just walking around, one Optimus bot generates a lot of data walking around, more than a car,
Yeah.
right? Because a car is just generating driving data. A bot
Hmm.
is generating stairway data and conversation. Like the cars will also have Grok, and the cars will also have conversations. So that's generating a whole bunch of new real data that can be turned into text, or maybe you don't need to use it as text. Maybe you use it as audio straight up. Um,
Hmm.
I I think there's a lot of potential value in that data, and this is where again Tesla has a massive lead because nobody is in a position to build a fleet of cars
Hmm.
that can collect that volume of data. and nobody's in a position to build that volume of humanoid bots to get all that
Right.
data. So I don't think Tesla relies on synthetic data. Tesla relies on conversation data with humans
Right.
in a variety of contexts.
Right. So
And the
um
cars and the bots.
the bot abundant scenario that you're describing is not either or. It's not manufacturing or this other stuff. Is that if I just was to duplicate car manufacturing capability with bot manufacturing capability, then um, they're saying, okay, we're trying to get to 20 million cars in 2030. If I was to make the same mass of Tesla bots in 2030,
100
instead of
million
20
easy.
million, and then it's 800 million easy, right? Because they weigh only 70 pounds. They could even 70 kilos, and
I
they
think it's
could be less.
125 pounds. It's about a 30th the mass of a car.
Right. So 600 million bots. So then you go into mass bots. If we had that chart going up to like Grok 10 or like GPT 12 or something like that, where you have a really heavy system, there is a ratio between training and inference that if I make my inference 5 times bigger or 2 times bigger, something like that, I can make my training 5 times smaller. So if I had trouble making this training thing 20 times bigger because of power and chips and blah, 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 if I make my inference bigger, then I can use less power over here, which my phone, I have like 5 watts on it. My laptop, I have 100 watts. I have 3,000 watts on my Tesla bot. So in terms of like needing a inference platform, I want to use a Tesla bot to do that. The other thing,
Where'd you get 3,000 watts? I haven't heard that before.
3 kilowatts for the batteries of a Tesla bot.
Battery's 2.3 kilowatt hours. I don't think if they went to 3 kilowatts, they'd use the battery in less than an hour. I think
Okay.
it's probably more like uh, probably more like 500 watts would be my
Okay.
guess.
Okay.
250 to 500 watts would be my guess. I don't know. I don't think we've seen that number.
Yeah, we haven't seen. I think I assumed 3 kilowatts for something. I thought I saw some diagram, but it's not like
It's
official
2.3
specs of it.
kilowatt hours in the battery pack. That was the last number we saw,
Mhm.
which is dramatically smaller than the volume of batteries in a car.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you would probably be looking at energy consumption around 300 to 500 watts,
Right.
which is
So
still a lot.
yeah. So it goes to the inference chip I could put in there could be like 20 times, 100 times more than the chip in the other thing. So more chip, more compute, as well as more power to run the thing. And for the usage case that you described, I would buy one in a heartbeat, but a Tesla bot. But that SpaceX has got direct to cell phone communications from the satellites. So basically, they can go, okay, I can do text now. By the end of this year, we'll have broadly released text to phones for T-Mobile. Next year, they'll also have voice and some level of data. So, and then this will get 100 times more because of Starship working, where they'll put up like way more satellites, way bigger satellites, way more
Bigger, more
communications.
powerful satellites.
Right. So then in 2 years, you have way more communications up there going direct to your phone or to your Tesla bot or to your cars. And then the need for inference means
Just
that
blew my mind.
I need to have a communication everywhere for this thing. And I need this not just as my the Tesla bot as my butler, as my translator, as my everything else. I need it to house my AI, to my AI copy to run it bigger and better, and give me all the answers and whatever else I need. So, and also just straight up communications, direct up to everything. So basically, it's my next generation phone is the Tesla bot. And if they go, oh, well, it costs $20,000 instead of $1,000 for the most expensive, or $1,500 for the most expensive iPhone, it will be 100 times better, and it will make money for you. So that's the whole point of like everything that Tesla will be making, cars, bots, they'll make money for the person. So then it's not how can I afford it? It's how can I not afford it?
Yeah,
So
see if your iPhone will clean your dishes and wash your clothes and mop your floor.
yeah, right,
The bot's there's a lot of things that bot will be able to do that make your life easier.
Right.
I don't see, my gut hunch is that the medium term for bots and robotaxis is not targeted to to consumer ownership. The
Hmm.
short term vision is, you get some idiots like us to buy bot beta program,
Yeah.
and and I think you could get 100,000 idiots. Like I would buy two probably,
Right.
but I
Right.
think you could get 100,000 idiots to be willing to do that, and
Right.
you'd start generating meaningful data.
Right.
Um, but long term, my guess is that Tesla's going to have fleets of bots that they're going to lease out. They're going to sell them to companies that will become, leasing entities. And
Mm.
you'll say, "Hey, I need a bot," and a bot will show up on a scooter, or a robotaxi will drop a bot off at your house, and
Right.
the bot will do some work in your backyard, and then be scooted off to somebody else's house to do some other work,
Hmm.
rather than you owning a bot full time. It's not. I
Right.
don't think it's as efficient for you to own a bot and have put your bot in the bot network as it
Hmm.
is for large fleet owners and Tesla or others to own fleets of bots.
Right.
So one other thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Sorry, if we can drop back to superchargers for a second. I
Yeah.
had this thought. I think somebody had said something like this in a reply on X or in a comment on a YouTube video.
Hmm.
It made a lot of sense to me. If you think about the supercharger, we're talking about bot. And bot is very, very high margin, very, very high value, very high revenue, very high profit.
Hmm.
Supercharger network is a lot of capex. It takes a lot of capital to build out superchargers. Your supercharger network costs a lot of money to build. It's profitable, but it's not ever going to have like more than 5 or 10% margins, right?
Hmm.
There's a sort of a limit on how profitable it's going to be. And so it doesn't really fit in the portfolio of Tesla if you're looking at it from a financial perspective.
Hmm.
So it would make sense to say, because then they made a deal. Somebody pointed this out. Again, it wasn't my idea. Somebody pointed this out. Tesla made a deal with BP, British
Hmm.
Petroleum, the oil
Right.
company, the gas station company, that they're selling them Tesla superchargers, slapping BP branded, stuff on them,
Hmm.
and putting them out wherever. And it's like $100 million. Like, well, why don't they find more partners like that and let other people own the supercharger network? And
Right.
it's just Tesla doesn't need, like, the revenue and profit from the supercharger network is trivial compared to the revenue and profit even from what they do now.
Yeah.
But when you go to a robotaxi world, it's like a footnote. It's not
Hmm.
even, it probably doesn't even you don't even bother reporting it,
Right.
right? It's so small. So it makes sense for Tesla to say, hey, let's shift this capex off. We'll sell superchargers that we manufacture to somebody else. We'll get a decent
Hmm.
margin on the superchargers we manufacture. We already have that capex because we already built the supercharger factories,
Hmm.
right? And let somebody else incur the capex of buying the superchargers and deploying them. And
Hmm.
um, so I could see Tesla basically sort of spinning off, in a sense, superchargers as an external business. And
Right.
then you can see, the question is, what other businesses does Tesla have? Like Tesla Energy is an important business and it's a big business. But is there a point where Tesla Energy is successful enough that they say, hey, let's IPO Tesla Energy as a separate unit?
Right.
Right? And Tesla retains, 60% ownership of the company, but it runs as a separate company. It has a separate CEO.
Hmm.
And it's no longer on Tesla's balance sheet. You
Hmm.
know, once you get to the high margin of robotaxi and bot, energy actually hurts your overall margins.
Right. Right.
Energy doesn't have the same software margins that robotaxi and bot do. So
Hmm.
or you just have Tesla real world AI as it's
Hmm.
spin that off and keep the rest. I think there's some way that you're going to see Tesla meaningfully separate out certain businesses like superchargers and energy. Um, and then it also helps you avoid the fear that big bad government's going to say you've gotten too big.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you want to split yourself up before they do.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. GE has split itself up. It's just the efficiency of it, and it would be it's still a huge business, but just as you say, not as fantastic as Tesla bot, Robotaxi, all those other things.
Well,
Um,
the point is that supercharger and energy are more like utility stocks.
yes.
They're consist. They're gonna pay out. You're gonna make money
Mm.
on them consistently, but they're never gonna make crazy money, and they're growing. So
Yeah.
there's some value in the growth, but they're not going to be the game-changing software revenues and margins that you're going to see from the other things. So,
Hmm.
um, if you're an investor, like, yeah, I want to hold some Tesla Energy.
Yeah.
I don't really care about holding Tesla Supercharger, but let BP make a little bit of extra incremental revenue on that.
Right.
Even like battery manufacturing, like does Tesla ultimately spin off the 4680 manufacturing as its own business.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I'm not saying yes, or maybe that just becomes a part of Tesla Energy. I don't know, but
Mhm.
that almost makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
That that's not in and of itself a high margin business.
Right. If you have five super businesses, multi-trillion, whatever, then clearing out the other stuff, which is good businesses, but not, why be number 20 on Elon's list of things to do, right? Like
Yeah,
even
yeah.
he has to do other things. This has been a great conversation, Warren. We definitely have to do it more often. Um,
Yes.
so need to catch up with you more as you travel around Asia and do all the business, but to talk about more other things.
All right.
So, okay, thank you.